Hey, buddy, how you doing?
Doing good. How are you?
Good. Welcome, everybody. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about biomechanics pain and how to deal with this while you're at home during this time frame. So, Julian
Mm.
is I would say, biomechanics expert, especially of the foot. It was his passion, not his fetish. And he specializes in getting people out of pain as well. He's actually in his office right now. You can see everything in the background. He also has a very deep association to health and looking at the complete picture when it comes to his clients. He does a lot of coaching with them, talking about not just the physical aspect, but the emotional aspect, as well as the everything else within life, of being able to take control of that and then feeding that back into the reason of why you're actually in pain and why you're actually dealing with that situation. So I thought I would invite Julian on here to discuss a little bit of that and some things that we can possibly do during this time frame. I hope I got your intro down right.
Yeah, that was awesome. Perfect.
I just made it up as we went, but I've known you for so long. Deep friend of mine. We started our education a while ago in a neurological class, and then kind of came up through it. And his expertise, I think, can come back to looking at the whole pattern, the whole picture. And so a lot of the issues, like one thing I was talking to him about last week was a few people that I saw on Facebook, they were having some issues. And so I asked them to reach out and message me. And the most common thing right now seems to be back pain because everyone's stagnant and everyone's moving less, sitting so much. And so it seems to be that there's an issue with any exacerbated issue is now kind of coming up even further, possibly because of lack of movement or possibly because of the emotional stress that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at ways that we can combat that or things that we can do now to deal with those types of situations. Like, number one, what is the what are some of the biggest issues that you see in your clinic, the most common things that people have, and how do you go about dealing with them? Let's top three.
Yeah. Top three. Yeah. Well, certainly, I mean, ankle mobility is a big one. Then sort of unresolved emotional stress that's affecting their body is definitely, I mean, everyone has that unless they're like a saint or something or like Buddha. Interestingly, during this time, how I've been kind of using my time is doing some research into the brain, more research into the brain. I think it's definitely our least understood area of the body, of the universe, really, actually. The nature of consciousness and the nature of how the brain works, and the pure complexity that is within the brain is just mind-boggling. It's beyond anything that we've ever created or encountered. Just the number of both neurons and then the number of synapses makes the complexity there is just like,
Isn't it supposed to like outweigh the stars or something like
yeah, the number of synapses is like 10 to the 31, which is like more than the stars in our galaxy. And then so I did some back of the napkin math of like how much data it would take to store to number each neuron and then number each synapse, like a sign of at least like, hey, this synapse connects from this neuron to this neuron and this neuron to this neuron. And it's like, 30,000 iPhones worth of data. Like just fill them all up. And then you would be able to actually map someone's brain. So the complexity is just staggering. So one thing I was reading about, this author named Joseph Ledoux, I think, French name, he, this is one you'll recognize from your work too, Ian, is people form memories in kind of obviously an imperfect way. One of them is explicit memory. Explicit memory is the memory you recall, like, oh yeah, back when I was a kid, I fell off my bike and I scraped my knee. And then those memories are written into your brain by the hippocampus. And then another part of your brain, the amygdala, writes in the emotional aspects of those memories. So you can recall the memory and you can recall explicitly, oh, I was feeling hurt or sad during that time. But the amygdala is responsible for also recreating that experience. Like if you recall it in a deep enough way, you will actually physically get those same responses. So like if they're repressed enough, if they haven't been like integrated enough, then and you'll actually get that physical response. And I think part of the work that I do with people is we're integrating those a little bit better and making the body not respond to those in sort of their latent form. So like if they're latent, if you have this amygdala written memory that is highly emotional, your body is responding to that constantly in a very small way, but small over a long span of time equals like large negative consequences. So getting the person can come in and be explicitly recalling the memory and being like, hey, it wasn't no big deal. But then you can go in and help them deal with the amygdala side of that. And then their body responds in a measurable way. Like you can measure it on the force plate, for example. You can measure it with your hands, with the tension in their body. So that's definitely a big thing. Now, practically speaking, during this time, that's not really like helping someone through an emotion is like highly specific. So it's not very good general, it's good general knowledge, but there's no general application that I can think of aside from like meditation and like these sort of things to like allow the feelings from past memories to come to the fore. So sorry, it's a long-winded answer to your question, but like, ankle stuff, thoracic spine's a big one, emotional ones like we just talked about, and say, yeah, like lack of glute recruitment due to long-term sitting. Those are like some top 4 things.
Kind of go back around to what you were saying, just
yeah,
kind of connect the dots for everybody. And correct me if I'm wrong. When you have an injury or you have pain, you're dealing with, let's say, like yesterday, a friend of mine reached out. They had neck pain, and they sit in front of a computer for about 11 hours a day. And they had a traumatic injury when they were a kid, so they cope with it and deal with it. And I see them, or I used to see them every once in a while to kind of help them out. But dealing with the initial injury itself, dealing with the emotional content that's wrapped around that pain and that fear factor that is subconscious, not conscious thought process, but it's subconscious. So in the back of your head, not the voice that's talking to you, but how you react to things. So there's an action, there's a reaction, how you react. Yeah. And so how you react to it is going to cause tension in your body. And the area that it causes tension in would be, usually, is the area of trauma that way back in the day. So this person, that stimulation of tension, that stimulation of threat or trauma or of some other type is causing that tension in that area, and that stress then becomes pain.
And those are exactly the amygdala. Yeah, those are the amygdala written memories. And that tension, that chronic tension, we think of fight or flight response, but really the mammalian reflexes are fight, flight, and freeze. Like if a rat suddenly encounters a cat, he'll just like freeze, so the cat can't see him. And that's still, we're mammals, so it's still built into our reflexes. And so that chronic muscle tension is a freezing of the muscle, and that's like an innate response, fight, flight, or freeze of the trauma. And so in the case of like having pain in general, I think we tend to, and maybe this is an outgrowth of how rational our society is, or we're trying to be rational, logical, we always try and make things like, all right, there's this problem, this is the cause, and it's one thing, right? And what I'm always coaching people on is, you have this problem, you have pain here, and there's like, you got to think of it more like the complexity in the brain. There's like 50 things attached to that. Actually, given how much interconnectedness there is up here between your ears, there's like everything attached to that. But it's weighted in certain ways. Like one thing might be weighted way heavily for why you're experiencing that symptom than all the other, millions of things that are connected to that. So really what our job is as, I think people who are trying to solve a problem is we got to treat the problem we got to give it its appropriate amount of respect. Like this is hugely complicated. We're going to do our best to try and order all those problems in the top, we're going to try and address the top 10 things, knowing that all the other 999,990 things are important, but not as important as potentially these 10. And when I think we give the problem that amount of respect, then we actually have a better chance of tackling it. Now, how we go about that, it's also a very complicated thing because you got two brains working on one problem. But I don't think it has to be complicated. And some people don't make it very complicated because we've got a lot of this, we've got a lot of our processing going on that we're not explicitly or consciously aware of, sort of like intuition, you could say, you know, like, so it doesn't always have to, I approach things very logically and sort of mathematically, engineering, like breaking down the problem into all these little different subcomponents and teaching the person about that. And it doesn't always have to be that way. It's just sort of my flavor. And just like you work a different way than I work. And
let's go back to the three that you talked about. So you got ankle, you got inactive glutes or hip restriction, and then thoracics. And so that's usually the most common things with people that are sitting for jobs or lack of immobility. So looking at someone's dealing with, like, let's say spinal compression that they don't know, they just feel back pain or there's some kind of tension or in their lower back. What are some things that you can go about doing to do a self-assessment of saying, okay, this is this or this. So by doing this, this can alleviate that problem for a short amount of time until we can get past this, or even some actual drills that someone can do to just increase movement. Because like one thing that people don't realize is that by sitting for long duration of time, there was this marketing campaign that went around a couple of years ago about how sitting is the new smoking on social media. And basically when you're sitting, you're compressing the tissue of your hamstrings and your butt. And so you're actually losing circulation to that area for a long enough duration of time. And so there's lack of stimulation, there's actually nerve stimulation. So they just kind of fall asleep. They go dormant in a sense. That's quote unquote. Again, it's trying to make it as simple as possible for everyone. So the next step is then you got to get up. When you got to go get a drink of water, you got to go to the bathroom. So the action of getting up, you no longer have those lower glutes or those upper hamstrings to fire to actually get you up. So the next thing to pull you is your hip flexors and your lower back to actually launch you upright. Doing that enough times and sitting for a long duration of time, you then just begin to lose muscle mass or stimulation within that area. That's just enough to start to cause issues. Some people more than others. Some people are just genetically gifted that it doesn't happen. We don't know why, it just does. And so those types of people, those office workers, the ones that are dealing with those types of issues, what are some things that you usually give away, some walkaways that would give them an upper hand in combating those particular problems?
Yeah. Now I have some personal favorites that I like for myself, based on Gary Ward's work with anatomy and motion in his flow motion model. What I found though,
right?
What was that?
It's a gait mechanics guy, right?
Yeah. That is, it might not be always the best for the layman, but for me, I like it because and it's probably good for you too. We know where the muscles attach. So it's taking the bones into a position such that the muscle has to be active, otherwise you fall over, basically. And I can show you one. But I found, like, at least in a handful of cases, the person can't do that at all. Like, it's so ingrained in them to use the other muscles. Like, you put them in the position and they either can't get in the position or they still manage to use something else instead of their glute. So, like, the first most basic one is lie down on your back, put one hand on each glute, and see, can you squeeze the right one and can you squeeze the left one? Like I'm doing it in my chair right now. And squeeze the right and kind of tilts me to one side, squeeze the left and tilts me to the other side, right? So put the hands, give you the more proprioceptive feedback. Can you feel that? And it's harder to do when you're seated than when you're lying down on your back, I'd say. So I've had a client, for example, come in, he couldn't do that at all. And he was having like sciatic type of problems because his piriformis was working so hard as a result of this inactive glute. And I'm like, and he tried to do it with his hands on his butt and he's like, I can't do it. I'm like, doesn't matter. Keep trying every day. Next week, you'll come back in and you'll be able to do it because you learn from failure, right? And he came back in the next week and he had less sciatic pain and he could do it voluntarily. And then I could build up from there to, maybe a standing position where he reaches or does some movement where he can feel the glute. So yeah, that would be, I think most people maybe that are seeing this video can probably already do that. They'll feel one glute under each. You might notice that one side doesn't contract as easily as the other. So you could just like, oh, I can't sleep at night. Maybe I could work on, what can I do right now that would maybe take my mind off what I'm worrying about and make things a little bit better for myself. Oh, maybe I can work on that sleepy left side of mine. And just sending that signal through the brain and down into the body that you can turn that thing on voluntarily, like just strengthening that neural path.
Well, add on to that, I'd say is because of the time that we have now, a lot of people just have a lot of free time,
Yeah.
and are home and are don't have an office space that they have to worry about someone looking over their shoulder, or they have more time at home. And
Yeah.
so the ability to actually take those 20 minutes, or take time every 20 minutes, or take time every hour, and actually do a little bit of work to get out of that discomfort and make sure that you're doing what you need to do by setting an alarm or whatnot, and doing those activation drills, I think is it's almost becoming inexcusable at this point, because
Mm-hmm.
what else are you going to do?
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting to think about the motivational factors and like how, because oftentimes we can prescribe the greatest sets of exercises and exactly what the person needs to do. And then if they don't do it, it's like, they come back in the next week for the next appointment and it's like, we developed this plan last time and you didn't do any of it. Like, what are you doing here? Like, what are we doing here? What is this about? Like, so I've spent some time thinking about motivations, and I think sometimes people don't. I've heard it described. I like this description of it. Like we have all these things around us that we can make better or change or modify in some way, like and they're in some ways our surroundings are like a part of us, but I think what is actually a part of us is obviously our body and our mind. And so during this weird pandemic, there's a bunch of things that we have no control over. Our sphere of influence is sort of shrunken down. Like we can't go into work and do all the things that would make our workplace better or advance our career. Well, we're basically stuck at home, maybe with our close friends or family. And so what can we make better in that circle? Well, we can almost always make something better in our body. We can do something to improve our relationship. We can do something to improve our living space. All of those would make our life we tend to poo-poo those things as like, hey, those aren't significant. Those aren't my career, which people are usually obsessed about, or they aren't my, my monetary wealth. These are things you don't have control over right now. So, motivating yourself to put yourself in the best possible position, given what you have control over right now, would be your body first, what you eat, which you can control very well right now, because you can still go to the grocery store and you have plenty of time to learn how to cook. And then your interpersonal relationships with the people closest to you in your life. So I've had multiple clients say that like they've been at home so much that their relationship with like their son and daughter have never been better. And like, that's pretty amazing. Like as long as you're not like glued to your phone and like reading all the terrible headlines and actually focusing on your children, the amazing things like that are possible during this time. Motivating yourself to actually implement those things in your body. I would say first, we've given like 4 or 5 that are very common in our little discussion here. If there was a way that you could determine like maybe you have one of those things, or pick one that stands out the most, and then that's like the one thing that you can like, I can at least do this, I can at least make this thing better. I think probably everyone has some degree of sleepy glute, and certainly some degree maybe of ankle restriction.
In my mind, there's 2 ways to do a self-assessment for an ankle. If you're having problems with it, even if you don't realize the problem is stemming from your ankle. a young lady in New York that reached out to me, I think 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
Personal trainer. She's attempting to do squats at home and body weight stuff, and her knees getting to the point of where she can't squat anymore, so she can't train. She's getting frustrated. And so we did a Zoom call looking at her squat, and you could see that there was a restriction in her ankle. And she was also dealing with back pain. So we did 2 quick assessments, did the mobility, and then all of a sudden the back pain and the knee pain was gone. And so
Awesome.
for practice, yeah, I know, I'm just patting myself on the back.
Yeah.
But just giving as an example to lead into in your practice, what are some easy assessment tools to, if someone's dealing with back pain, knee pain, shoulder pain, neck pain, what is something they can do? Because you always go to the feet. That's the first thing that you always check. So how would you give a self-assessment for that to see if that is like 50% or 40% or even 80% of the problem for that person?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a lot of the basic ones would be like, this one, no doubt, is take like a step close to a wall, maybe 4 inches away, and see how far you can bend your knee directly over your foot, maybe. Make sure, if you have to go in, that's indicative. So if I'm facing you head on and I'm coming in to reach the wall, then that's indicative of a potential problem in the ankle. But let's say you got a ruler, something, and you go, I think Gray Cook and those guys say like 4 inches away. I don't know that that's like that hard and fast of a rule. So see if you can touch the wall with your knee and see if that's different side to side. Because, sometimes people will have a lot more than this, and it's more important the imbalance than the actual number, than the hard and fast. Oh, you got to be 4 inches, or you need 30 degrees dorsiflexion. Maybe a person has more than that. Maybe they have 35.
You're slowly going up.
Yeah, my desk is raising up.
Oh, okay.
I have a standing desk.
I thought you were on a drone and you were going to go out the window or something.
So yeah, maybe you have. I've seen people with lots of dorsiflexion, like more than average. Let's say they have 35 in one, but they only have 30 in the other. That can indicate some sort of imbalance in the body. But yeah, the imbalance left to right, I think, is more important than perhaps more. How much? Yeah, exactly. Than the absolute number. The relative imbalance as opposed to the absolute imbalance according to the averages of what we've measured through physiotherapy type of testing.
Let's say somebody has they have a restriction. The most 2 common ones will be there will be like a physical inability to get to that range of motion, or the second will be there'll be three issues. My apologies. And then the next one will be an issue on the front of the ankle or the side of the ankle. They'll actually be pain when they go into that range of motion, go too far into it. And then the other one is just direct. It'll recreate the knee or the back pain when they do that. So what would you then recommend? Like someone just did this. They watched this video. What is the next step for them to do when they find one of those 3 most common things?
So even like they do this assessment, or let's say they're doing a squat, for example, and they find that, oh, when I go down in the squat, this knee hurts, and I notice since maybe they videoed themselves that my knee tracks inward or something.
Yeah, or the assessment you just did, and it's
okay,
and it's showing a sign of something's going on.
Yeah. So let's pretend that my left ankle doesn't go as far. Let's say I do the assessment. Actually, let's see what mine actually is. I can go
pretty far.
Scoop pretty far.
Have pretty good range of motion.
Yeah, but let's see if it's any different from my right. So I'm going to line my foot up as close as I can to the right. Yeah, and my right is restricted versus my left. My left has got maybe another half a centimeter further than my left can go further than my right, basically. So my right needs some help. So, and imagine we only have, what sort of equipment do we have? No weights, just our body, yeah?
Pretty much.
Okay. Let's see if I can capture this in the video. So for one, you can start just by getting into as deep of a squat as you can. Maybe you need to hold on to something, right? And then you can just shift your body weight over there. Now, I can't get as much of a stretch into the bottom of my ankle as I might want here. So what I would do is I'd actually take a knee on the left and then kind of give myself a hug and place all my upper body weight on my knee so that I can transfer that weight into the right side of my body. And then I might even like play with these different angles that would come in here until I feel a stretch. Now, since I have some equipment at home, I'd place a large weight here, and I might wedge, given my knowledge of my own problems in this foot, certain things to emphasize different movements, or take a band and have the band pulling so I can get more stretch along the back here. Granted, if you don't have that equipment, that's kind of tough.
So some of the just to break that down, so the main points of that is, if he's having a physical restriction, like there's no real pain in the ankle, but there is an immobility from side to side. And by doing that particular stretch, whatever discomfort or pain you're dealing with, whether it be lower back, knee, neck, or just ankle itself, that alleviates the problem. Then you know that that problem is stemming from that specific area, or is part of that.
Part of it. Yep.
And so you want to actually create stretching in the back of your calf. So that calf area needs some either soft tissue work that you can self-mobilize with foam roller, or
yep.
You can even Google how to self-myofascial release and find ways to do it that way.
Yeah, there's a ton of self-myofascial, self-mobilization on YouTube. Like, I think the first guy who really popularized the self-treatment is Kelly Starrett, who I think also, I mean, he said that whole sitting is the new smoking thing a bunch in a lot of those videos. I remember I first started watching those about 8 or 9 years ago. But yeah, there's a ton of different options out there. So you do the self-assessment, you pick your side, and then like that is definitely within your realm of influence. You can make that part of your body better and prevent, if you don't, not to use too much fear here, but if you don't address that now, like it's going to come and bite you in the ass, like without a doubt. Like there's no doubt. Assuming you don't like suddenly die from a car accident tomorrow, it will bite you in the ass. It's going to bite you in the ass eventually. So you have the time, got nothing better to do, address a problem that you can identify, and yeah, that maybe that's a way to motivate people.
Okay. So yeah. So if the jump forward, if the pain is in the front of the ankle, like they actually go through that and they're actually feeling pain in their ankle, what is the next step then? Is it
pain in the
injured, they're at home, they're limping around, they're going to lose that mobility to actually do work?
Yeah, pain in the front of the ankle, that would make me think of like some sort of impingement, like some of the bones in here aren't moving very well, gliding on top of each other. Yeah, the foot gets kind of complicated on what would be the next step in the flow chart. Never really thought of this from a at-home perspective of like, this is good. I like it. You're challenging me.
So one thing that reaches off my head is a simple thing you can order off Amazon, because you can have stuff delivered to your house.
Yeah.
In the state. So getting like some TheraBands,
yep,
some rehab bands, whatever you want to call them, and using that, putting your ankle and your foot into it, and then strapping it to something else. So you're causing resistance, pulling your ankle bones behind you, because if the problem is an impingement, if the joints are actually jamming up against each other, you want them to move and glide into the position they want to move into.
Yeah. You can see it, but you don't need the kettlebell. Obviously, you can just affix the band to like a leg of a couch or a heavy piece of furniture, or jam it in a door. So like what Ian was talking about there was the bone that's between and underneath these two bones, the talus, can get kind of stuck. And using the band, we can kind of, I'm going to kind of redirect the band a little bit with my foot so you can see better in the camera. Imagine this pulling that way. You can apply a lot of tension using the band, and then that will kind of free up the ankle a bit, and then you can move around the restriction and start to restore what's missing in the movement in your foot. And you know, there's a million different variations on those, and it's about finding the one that will get you, specifically you, the result that you're looking for, and then implementing the fix that is actually doing it every day. And yeah.
Oh, that's a great explanation. So then the next step would be, so we talked about seated glutes, we talked about ankle mobility, and then the next thing would be thoracic. So your mid chest, your mid spine, causing lower back, causing neck pain, causing shoulder restrictions. Most common thing in the bodywork physical therapy, body mechanics world that is seen and that needs to be addressed when it comes to the upper body stuff.
For sure. So I have a lot of issues in this area, I would say. It's been kind of a focal point for my own self-mobilizations, mainly this area for me. This is more the clavicle and sternum, but I've been known to spend a good deal of time in front of the computer. And what I've found that I like the best, you can do this just with your hands. I use this little tool I made, but what I like to do is I just grip my hands behind my back like this, and then straighten my elbows and pull my arm away from the ground. And I find that puts my spine in extension. And if I take a deep breath there, then I get expansion of the chest, and I'll feel multiple pops, pop, pop, pop. And then I was, surprisingly, I was suffering from some thoracic pain. I want to say like 6 months ago. And like I was getting down on those double balls, these yoga tune-up balls that working on the spine. Nothing was really improving. And then, you know, it's such a simple maneuver. I started doing that, and like my pain was just gone after that. So now I do this every morning and try and get some extension in there. I've got some, you know some about this, but the serratus is involved in that with me from a neck injury and stuff. But I like it with this dowel, which I put some sort of rubber coating on to make it a little bit more like easier to grip. The dowel kind of forces you into more external rotation, so you could just take a little piece of wood, or this is a PVC pipe with some wrapping around it, and if you try and get your hands as close together as you can, and then straighten out your elbows, and then elevate that bar as far as you can. Yeah, I definitely got a couple more sort of adjustments, pops, cracks than I did with just my hands. Your hands, you got to grip, and you don't have as much. It's harder to do that. You need a lot more grip strength to keep those hands.
Humeral rotation, by creating that wrist rotation, you're creating more humeral rotation up the.
Yeah.
And that also leads back to the same assessment we did with your ankle and looking at pain sequences of whether it's tissue or joint. And so the old argument that physical therapists and chiropractors have, saying, it's this, no, it's that, is it can be both, or it doesn't have to be just one fixes all. Like the easy assessment, you took a foam roller, or you took those yoga tune-up balls, and you rolled out the tissue, but the tissue is still tight. So obviously it's tight for a reason. It's protecting you from something. And so it sounds like what you were describing is those pops, those adjustments, were that the vertebrae or the ribs were not sitting properly, or even the sternum, the front side, that bone that you have in the front of your chest wasn't sitting properly. And by you adjusting it, the tissue didn't feel like it needed to hold so tightly. And so that discomfort, that tightness kind of just went away on its own. So that is a very simple, actually, self-assessment for someone to do, is by, if they're dealing with those kinds of pains, like neck pain, again, thoracic pain, shoulder pain, by doing those movements, as long as it doesn't hurt, obviously, and they find some alleviation, they then understand with these tool sets of what the issue is and what the next steps are to do for themselves.
Yeah, and I would add to that, like let's say you have a joint restriction, and you make the joint restriction better, the tissue around that joint, that crosses that joint, let's say, isn't used to that new mobility. And so like, you might have to do this back and forth. Okay, I'm going to work on the joint, get the joint moving. Now I'm going to get the tissue moving. I'm going to get the joint moving a little bit more. I'm going to get the tissue moving. And then until that, maybe that isn't perfect, that little joint tissue complex that we're talking about, whatever that one might be, isn't perfect. But before long, it's going to be dropping down on that list, you know, that hypothetical list of 1 million pieces that we were talking about earlier. It's no longer number 1, 2, 3, 4, or maybe even 10. And so then should you be working on it anymore? Well, something else has probably moved to the number 1 spot, right? And then if you keep attacking, like playing whack-a-mole, attacking the top few items, or the items that are popping up to the top. Now what those are can be a little tougher to self-assess, and that's where you need someone like yourself, for example.
You even.
Or me, yeah.
Change plugs.
Yep.
So yeah, and then what he was kind of saying there is, to kind of sum that all up is again, we were talking about like we came up with the 3 most common things are ankle, glute, and then thoracic spine for a lot of the people that don't have the most mobile life. Staying hours and hours kind of in a specific situated place. And so by working on the one that seems to be alleviating the most amount of pain, you're not done. You always want to take it up to the next level and keep working at how do I improve this? How do I get this done? And then we go back to the mindset of why should you be even doing that? Like that is the important part, because most people are like, no, I just want to get this fixed so I can go back to the life that I have and I can live that life within those restrictions and be happy about that. And that kind of mindset is the thing that triggers me, because especially in this type of situation, especially in this type of world that we're in now, what I've been saying from the beginning is why limit yourself now or let yourself fall back into your old patterns? Improve yourself in these moments that you have. You have nothing but time now. And so make yourself better, whether it's physical, emotional, or mental, or economical in the money fashion, focusing on your business. As long as you're doing everything in a healthy standpoint and making yourself a better human being once you get out of this, like that is how you win this situation.
Yeah. I was thinking about it as you were talking, that the, why do some people not do these things? And it's like, is there some form of like self-loathing, like not respecting yourself? And I would say, let's say to anyone out there who feels that, or who maybe is like, yeah, that might be me, but nah, you know, sort of in denial about it, perhaps, is that when you don't take care of yourself, it's not just you that suffers. It's like, well, one, it's your immediate family, but then also the people who depend on you. So like the people at work, even, that maybe like one day this problem that you are letting lurk and not facing will take you out. Like it might even like put you in enough pain that you have to quit work for a few weeks. And that won't just take you out. That will do, you know, knock-on effects to everyone. There's the economic damage associated with pain is, you know, huge. So, so it's not just about being selfish for yourself. It also, I would say, harms the whole when you don't prioritize really the thing that's in your most immediate care, available for care, like all the time, if you just learn some really simple tools to take care of yourself. So yeah.
I was it's interesting you actually brought that up. I was writing this short ebook about the immune system and why it's important now more than ever. And in the lead, I was talking about how health itself has to change. The perspective of health itself has to change nowadays, because how we look at health is from I'm injured, fix me. I'm sick, fix me. I have disease, fix me. But not from a preventative standpoint. And so now more than ever, coming out of this, at least in my head, the only way for us to move forward is to change that perspective and looking at your health no longer just affects you, it now affects your neighbor, it now affects a person you're walking past on the street. And so how strong your body is from a physical, a immunological, a biochemical perspective is just as important to you as it is the person standing next to you in line at Whole Foods.
Yeah. Because, you know, if we all took a little bit more responsibility for ourselves and made everything a little bit better, then the people who, like, you know, maybe this virus can take a certain amount of us. Shit, are we going to be demonetized because of that? Maybe maybe this illness can take a certain percent of us out, regardless of how good our immune system is, just due to genetics and stuff. Um, if we don't take care of ourselves and occupy a space that someone else who really needs it could, like the elderly or something, yeah, then we're literally harming someone else by not taking care of ourselves. So yeah,
And
now more than ever.
a lot of people who watch this will be will be listening to it and say, I don't know if my ankle injury can be pushed to that limit. But it's, again, it goes back to mindset. It
Yeah.
goes back to the idea of what are you worth? And if you're in pain, why aren't you doing something about it? And if you live that part of your life in that perspective, what else are you doing to cause harm? Because usually in my world, and again, these are the clients that I see that come to my office. So in my office, my bubble is very small and unique, that where you have someone who comes in and they're dealing with a specific issue, but that issue is in the musculoskeletal system. It doesn't always have to start there. It doesn't, but it's finishing there to the point of where they now cannot ignore the underlying problem. And so all the other issues that they have that you can ignore with medication or, you know, like eczema, and being able to wear
Yep.
like clothing to ignore it and just be like, well, it's a skin condition, so I'm just gonna ignore that. Well, that's an underlying cause. It's an abnormality. And so
Yep.
as inflammation is created, that will create other issues. And again, people will say, can argue this, but direct cause and effect, and there is a correlation to inflammation in the body. And so
Yeah.
if you are not treating yourself like how you should, like you are important and your pain is something that is abnormal, and so you should be working on that. What else in your life, physically, emotionally, spiritually, are you not doing as well?
Yeah. And I would add to that as well. You're pointing out, I think, really well that all these things are in fact interconnected, and that people do still have this propensity to make one thing about one thing. Oh, well, this eczema, that's just something. I'm going to put that in a box, and that's not related to my current musculoskeletal pain, when in fact, you know, it is, obviously, because everything's interconnected. But like, take the ankle problem that the person's not addressing. How is that going to lead to them not being, or lead to like an illness that could affect them? Well, if they if they have an ankle problem that's causing them not to go out in the woods to get a hike, one is their cardiovascular isn't going to be as good. Two, they won't be as exposed to nature, which will regulates their immune system, and then that could push them just over the edge enough that they get sick and need help, and someone else doesn't get that help. So
You were talking to me about that. That's an interesting topic. I haven't had a chance to watch that video yet. You were talking about that doctor who was discussing that one study.
yeah.
In nature.
So Dr. I think Schultz is is how you pronounce it, but he runs a YouTube channel called MedCram. It's normally a YouTube channel designed for medical students cramming for their exams, I think. But lately he's been doing updates on the current pandemic. And one of his updates, I think is updates number 56, he talks about this very thorough and rigorous Japanese study where they did repeated studies on this phenomenon that they noticed, that when they took some workers from a Japanese city and they brought them out in the woods for a hike. And I think the hikes were like 2.5 miles long for a couple days, right? And then they measured their immune system markers. Natural killer cells is the innate immune system. It's the thing that would be the primary fighter of this virus, for example. And they all had very statistically significant increases in those NK cells after the hike. And they were trying to figure out why the fuck that would happen. So they took another group of people and they took them on a vacation, but to another city. And they took another group of people on a vacation again to the woods, and they had this response. So then they were measuring the chemicals that were in the air in the woods, and they noticed that there's these polyphenols, these like these aromatic substances that are just naturally secreted by the trees. And so they took the essence of those and then had people go on a vacation into these cabins, let's say. And in the cabins, they release these aromatic substances in one set and not in these other set. And the people who had those aromatic substances and were exposed to them had an increase in their immune function, and the people who didn't. So I was like, it blew me away because I always thought, well, aromatherapy, that seems kind of like woo woo and bullshit. But there's like direct evidence that aromas that we take in through our nose or inhale through our lungs increase our immune function, which was like, what the fuck? And this is like it was like a, very Western medical evidence-based, random, guy talking about this. So that's what lended even more credibility to the study. So
That's interesting, actually.
yeah.
Yeah, something to think about.
Yep, for sure.
I'm craving getting out into Yosemite.
Yeah, me too.
Next time in Oakland.
Yep.
So just to kind of circle back around, we've got looking at different ways of looking at how to treat or assess and reevaluate pain issues that you're dealing with. The mindset about things is again one of the most important aspects, because that is where everything starts. Like when you want to eat better, when you want to make more money, when you want to stand up for yourself, when you're looking to change careers, when you're looking to start a YouTube channel, when you're looking to get your health back or eliminate pain in your body, it's the mindset is the first thing, and that is what is literally the first step that you need in order to take that next rod.
Yeah. And I would say, where do we start? Like, I think when we start somewhere and we see some sort of positive change, that will motivate us to pursue that further. And one thing that is always in our circle of influence is definitely our body, where it's always with us all the time. And there's almost always something we could do about it. Like even like we're talking about these slightly more complicated ankle mobilizations, but like even if you're just like, well, I'm going to do this like stretch here of my soleus or whatever, there's always something in your body that is within your grasp to make slightly better. So like you can do that and you can put in the work and see that immediately get this gain, then you have something to chase after. Well, it turns out I'm the type of thing, the type of person, the type of being that can make things better. And as you make them better for yourself, you become more capable, and then you can make more things better. And then the thing to keep you running that direction, the thing you got to run away from, is the negative consequences of if you don't take that action. That is like the example of if you ignore that ankle, it's going to bite you in the ass. Like it might not be now, it might be a few months in the future or years, but it will come back and haunt you. So so run away from that, but run towards these good things that you can make change in. And the most immediate thing is your body, and then you can expand out from there. So that would be my motivational speech there.
Well, cool. Thank you very much, Julian.
You're welcome.
Hopefully I can get you back on here and we can have some more discussions and go a little more in depth and some other stuff.
I'd love to.
If people are looking to find you, where can they find you?
Yeah, they can find me, let's see, I'm Julian Therapy on Instagram. You can find me Julian Corwin on Facebook. My website's santarosapainandperformance.com. And they can email me at, I don't know if I need to give like 50 million ways to contact me, but my email would be Julian Pain and Performance. That's all one word, pain and performance .solutions.
Cool. Well, thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. And if you are so kind, go ahead and hit the subscribe button or hit the like button or even comment below about your agreements or disagreements or even the issues you're dealing with, because perhaps Julian can jump on at some time, or myself, and assist you in some way or form to maybe make things a little bit easier during these times.
Yeah, make things better. Awesome. Thanks, buddy. Have a good one.